The hacker hit back. Data will be published in 24 hours.
We warned you. We always keep our word. If we wouldn't receive a ransom, we should process data, because nobody will believe us in the future.
We're about to dive into one of the biggest digital heists in Australian history. Our story begins with Medibank, Australia's largest health insurance provider. Now you might be thinking, just another insurance company. What's the big deal? They're a cornerstone of Australia's healthcare system, covering millions of people across the country. But here's the thing, Medibank isn't your average insurer. We're talking about a company sitting on a gold mine of personal health data. Everything from your last doctor's visit to that embarrassing rash you hope no one would ever know about. It's a normal day at Medibank's headquarters. Employees are going about their business, processing claims, answering customer calls, the usual stuff. Little do they know, deep within their computer networks, something sinister is brewing. In the world of cybersecurity, there's always someone watching, probing for weaknesses. They're about to become ground zero for one of the most devastating cyber attacks Australia has ever seen. And Medibank, on the other side of the world in Russia, Revil is planning their next biggest attack. They are one of the most notorious ransomware gangs out there. These aren't your average script kiddies. They're the real deal. The kind of hackers that keep CEOs up at night. Revil operates like a well-oiled machine. But their product? Digital extortion. They're known for big attacks, huge ransom demands, and a nasty habit of leaking stolen data when they don't get paid. Now imagine you're Revil. You're sitting in your secret lair, probably somewhere in Russia, scouring the web for your next big score. We're talking about a treasure trove of what the industry calls personally identifiable information and protected health information. You stumble upon Medibank. Names, addresses, social security numbers, medical diagnoses, treatment records, the works. For a ransomware gang like Revil, this is like finding the Holy Grail. But Revil isn't about to go in guns blazing. No, these guys are smarter than that. It's going to attract a lot of attention, and not the good kind. So they start poking around, looking for the best way to slip into Medibank's systems without setting off any alarms. Little do they know, they're about to set off a chain of events that will shake Australia to its core, spark an international manhunt, and change the face of cybersecurity down under forever. The game is on, and Medibank doesn't even know it's playing it. It's like that feeling when you know someone's been in your house, but you can't quite put your finger on what's different. Their security team spots something off in their customer data systems. Medibank's incident response team jumps into action. They're investigating, notifying authorities, the whole 9 yards. At this point, they think they've dodged a bullet. They even put out a statement saying there's no evidence that any sensitive data, including customer data, has been accessed. But here's the thing about cybersecurity. What you see isn't always what you get. Sometimes the bad guys are already hiding in the shadows of your system, and you don't even know it. They shut down affected systems and start reaching out to potentially affected customers. The next day, Medibank goes public with the incident. It's Damage Control 101. Isolate the problem and keep people in the loop. But while Medibank's playing defense, Revil's on the offensive. These guys aren't your average script kiddies. First thing they do? They're pros, and they're playing the long game. Set up 2 back doors in Medibank's system. It's like having a spare key hidden under the doormat. If one gets found, they've still got another way in. With their secret entrances in place, Revil starts performing network reconnaissance. They're casing the network, figuring out where all the valuable data is stored, what security measures are in place, and how they can move around without getting caught. They're mapping out Medibank's entire network, looking for the juiciest targets. Revil's patient, methodical. This goes on for weeks. It's like they're planning a heist in a high-security museum, figuring out where every camera and motion sensor is before they make their big move. While REvil's digging deeper into Medibank systems, Medibank's cybersecurity team is trying to figure out what the hell is going on. It's a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, and at this point, Medibank doesn't even know who they're up against. Little do they know, REvil's about to drop a bombshell that'll shake Medibank and all of Australia to its core. REvil reached out with a message that would make any CEO's blood run cold. These cybercriminals claimed they'd swiped at least 200 gigabytes of customer data. We've got your data, and we can prove it. To put that in perspective, that's like stealing a small library's worth of information. We're talking names, addresses, and potentially much more sensitive stuff. But these guys weren't just making empty threats. They handed over 100 samples of policyholder records as proof. In the hacking world, we call this proof of compromise. It's like a burglar showing you photos of the inside of your house to prove they've been there. The next day, October 20th, the threat actor dropped another bombshell. The stolen data wasn't just names and addresses. We're talking about the really sensitive stuff, medical diagnoses, procedures where people got treatment. The kind of info most of us would rather take to our graves than have leaked online. Now, Medibank's in a real pickle. On one side, they've got cybercriminals threatening to leak their customers' most sensitive data. On the other, they've got millions of customers whose trust is hanging by a thread. This is data exfiltration, when the bad guys steal your data right out from under your nose. A ticking clock counting down to potential disaster. And in the middle, it's like someone breaking into your house and making off with your most valuable possessions. Except in this case, the valuables are bits and bytes of incredibly sensitive information. Medibank now had to figure out just how bad this breach was. And let me tell you, it was bad. We're talking about a data breach that exposed the most personal information of millions of Australians. Combined with another recent breach at Optus, roughly 40% of Australia's entire population had their data compromised within a month. The clock was ticking, the pressure was mounting, and Medibank had some tough decisions to make. Would they pay the ransom and potentially get their data back? Or would they stand firm and risk the cyber criminals leaking everything? Either way, they were in for a world of hurt. Now, REvil's not about to sit on this gold mine. They're in it for the payday, and they know exactly how to turn up the heat. On October 20th, just a day after their big heist, they reach out to Medibank with a message that would make any CEO's blood run cold. We've got your data, and we'll sell it unless you pay up. And here's where it gets really nasty. REvil tells Medibank they'll start by targeting 1,000 customers they consider prominent, or with very interesting diagnoses. It's a smart move. Go after the high-profile cases first, ramp up the panic. They're not just after money anymore. They're weaponizing people's most private information. They've got REvil breathing down their neck, threatening to spill secrets that could devastate lives. Now Medibank's in the fight of its life. They've got millions of customers whose trust is hanging by a thread. And they've got a ticking clock counting down to potential disaster. At first, Medibank tries to downplay the breach. But as the evidence piles up, reality hits like a freight train. Classic corporate move, right? By October 26, they have to face the music and admit the hackers have accessed all their clients' personal data. Now the real storm begins. Medibank's got to make a decision that'll shape the future of cybersecurity in Australia. Do they pay the ransom and potentially get their data back? Or do they stand firm and risk REvil dumping everything online? It's not just about Medibank anymore. Pay the ransom, and you might solve your immediate problem, but paint a target on every other Australian company's back. This is setting a precedent for the whole country. Don't pay, and you're taking a stand against cybercrime. But at what cost? November 7th, 2022. Medibank drops the bomb. They're not paying. It's a gutsy move and they know it. They figure paying up might just encourage more attacks, not just on them, but on Australia as a whole. But here's the thing about playing hardball with cybercriminals. They don't take kindly to being told no. And reveal, they're about to show Medibank and the whole world just how nasty they can get. Medibank's CEO states, paying could have the opposite effect and encourage the criminal to directly extort our customers. It's a high-stakes gamble. On one hand, paying might get their data back and stop the leak. On the other, it's like putting up a big neon sign saying, "We pay ransoms." But here's the kicker. There's no guarantee these cybercriminals would keep their word, even if Medibank paid up. Come and get us. They might take the money and leak the data anyway, or come back for seconds, thinking they found an easy mark. It's about setting a precedent for the entire country. This decision isn't just about Medibank anymore. Pay the ransom, and you might solve your immediate problem, but paint a target on every other Australian company's back. Don't pay, and you're taking a stand against cybercrime, but at what cost? Reveal doesn't take kindly to being told no. 2 days later, on November 9th, they make good on their threats. They start dumping Medibank's customer data on the dark web. And these guys aren't just dumping data, they're putting on a show. They post what they call good and naughty lists of Medibank customer data. It's like some twisted version of Santa's list, but instead of presents, it's people's most private medical info. We're talking successive batches of stolen customer data hitting the web, all out there for anyone to see. This isn't just a data leak, it's a full-on data disaster. The kind of stuff that can wreck lives, ruin relationships, and careers. Medibank's customers trusted them with their most private health information, and now that trust is shattered across the country. But the fallout? It's just getting started. Bloomberg crunches the numbers and comes up with a figure that'd make any CEO break out in a cold sweat. $960 million. That's what they estimate this breach could cost Medibank in compensation. It's not just a hit to the bottom line. It's a financial gut punch that could reshape the entire company. The Australian government isn't sitting idle. They form a cybercrime task force that'd make most police departments jealous, 100 officers strong, led by the Australian Federal Police and Australian Signals Directorate. This isn't just a response. It's a declaration of war on cybercrime. And it's not just Medibank under the microscope. The Australian Prudential Regulation Authority is now breathing down their neck, demanding they fix their security issues. They're even talking about hitting executives in the wallet for this mess. This hack isn't just a wake-up call for one company. It's shaking Australia's entire approach to cybersecurity. From government policies to corporate practices, everything's changing because of what happened to Medibank. In today's world, cybersecurity isn't optional. The message is clear. It's essential. And Australia's learning that lesson the hard way. The Medibank saga was far from over. On January 23, 2024, more than a year after the attack, the cybercrime story took an international turn. The US, UK, and Australia joined forces to drop the hammer on a Russian national named Alexander Armakov. They hit him with sanctions for his alleged key role in the Medibank hack. Anyone giving this guy assets, including crypto or ransomware payments, would be breaking the law. This move shows just how far-reaching the consequences of the Medibank hack had become. What started as a cyber attack on an Australian health insurer had now escalated into an international incident involving some of the world's most powerful nations. In the aftermath of the Medibank hack, Australia isn't just licking its wounds, it's gearing up for a cyber revolution. The Home Affairs Minister unveils plans for a new cybersecurity strategy that's nothing short of ambitious. The goal? To make Australia the world's most cyber-secure country by 2030. Now you might be thinking, yeah, right. Good luck with that. But here's the thing, they're not messing around. This isn't just a response. It's a declaration of war on cybercrime. The government's even considering a ban on ransom payments to hackers. They're thinking paying up might just encourage more attacks. It's a bold move, and it shows just how serious Australia is about changing the game. But it's not just about government action. The Medibank breach is changing how the entire country thinks about cybersecurity. It's not just an IT problem anymore. It's a national security issue, a public health concern, and a wake-up call for every company holding sensitive data. The message is clear. In today's world, cybersecurity isn't optional. It's essential. And while the road ahead is long and fraught with challenges, Australia is determined to learn from the Medibank disaster and come back stronger. In the end, this isn't just a story about a hack. It's about adapting, evolving, and fighting back. It's about a country's resilience in the face of a digital threat. And while the cyber landscape will always be a battlefield, Australia is aiming to be better armed for the next fight. So, there you have it. One hack, millions of lives affected, $1 billion price tag, international sanctions, and a country vowing to transform its entire cybersecurity landscape. All because some hackers decided to go after a health insurance company's data. But in the world of cyber defense, this might just be the beginning of something even bigger. In the world of cybercrime, it doesn't get much bigger than this. It's early 2019, and a mysterious figure known only as Putinkrab starts making waves on Russian cybercrime forums, peddling ransomware source code to the highest bidder. For those of you who don't know, ransomware is a type of malware that encrypts a victim's files, essentially holding their data hostage until a ransom is paid. It's a lucrative business for cybercriminals, and Putinkrab has just opened up a whole new world of possibilities. With his ransomware, he created an affiliate program. This is like a twisted version of an ordinary franchise where other cybercriminals can purchase and use the ransomware code in exchange for a cut of the profits. It's a win-win for the bad guys and a nightmare for the rest of us. As his affiliate program took off, the ransomware started popping up everywhere, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Imagine waking up one morning to find all your files encrypted with a taunting message demanding thousands of dollars in Bitcoin to get them back. It's enough to make even the most tech-savvy among us break out in a cold sweat. But here's the thing. This wasn't just any old ransomware gang. It was Lockbit. Putinkrab's work led him to form an organized and ruthless business. As their notoriety grew, so did their ranks, with affiliates like Artur Sumbitov and Ivan Bastarlord Kondratiev joining the fold. They had a knack for staying one step ahead of the law. These guys weren't just in it for the money, they were in it for the thrill of the hunt. The rush of taking down big targets and watching the world scramble to pick up the pieces. So how did Lockbit become the stuff of cybersecurity nightmares? And more importantly, what led to their downfall? Stick around, because this story is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single twist or turn. Alright, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of how Lockbit rose to power. It all started with a guy named Dmitry Koroshev, aka Putinkrab. In early 2019, he started selling his custom ransomware source code on Russian hacking forums, and it didn't take long for word to spread. By April of that same year, Koroshev had launched Lockbit's affiliate program, and that's when things really started to take off. An affiliate program, for those of you who don't know, is basically a way for ransomware creators to outsource their dirty work. They provide the code, and other cybercriminals, known as affiliates, distribute it to unsuspecting victims. In return, the affiliates get a cut of the ransom profits. It's like a franchise, but instead of selling burgers, they're peddling viruses. Lockbit's affiliate program was a hit from the get-go. Cyber criminals from all over the world were lining up to get their hands on Khrushchev's code, and before long Lockbit ransomware was popping up left and right. The affiliates were relentless, always on the hunt for their next big score. Hospitals, schools, businesses, no one was safe. But here's the thing about ransomware. It's not just about the money. Sure, the payouts can be huge, but for a lot of these guys, it's about the thrill of the game. They get off on the power trip of holding someone's digital life hostage, watching them squirm as they try to come up with the cash to get their files back. It's a sick and twisted world, but for the affiliates of Lockbit, it was just another day at the office. As Lockbit's reign of terror continued, a few key players started to emerge from the shadows. Artur Sungatov and even Bastard Lord Kondratiev, two of the group's most notorious affiliates, quickly made a name for themselves with their brazen tactics and jaw-dropping ransom demands. Sungatov in particular seemed to have a knack for sniffing out high-value targets. He'd spend weeks, sometimes months, studying a company's network, looking for weaknesses he could exploit. And when he found one, he'd strike hard and fast, unleashing Lockbit's encryption scheme and leaving a trail of digital destruction in his wake. Bastard Lord, on the other hand, was known for his sheer audacity. This guy had no qualms about going after anyone and everyone from small mom-and-pop shops to multinational corporations. He'd slap $1 million ransom demand on a company's encrypted files and then sit back and watch as they scrambled to come up with the cash. They were raking in millions from their victims, and law enforcement was always 2 steps behind. For a while there, it seemed like Lockbit was unstoppable. Companies were shelling out big bucks for cybersecurity consultants, desperate to protect themselves from the group's ever-evolving tactics. It was like watching a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with the mice armed with state-of-the-art encryption software. But here's the thing about the cybercrime world. It's always changing. New players enter the game, old ones get busted, and alliances shift like the tides. And as Lockbit's affiliates got bolder and more brazen, they started to attract some unwanted attention not just from law enforcement, but from within their own ranks. See, even among thieves, there's a code of honor. And when one of Lockbit's affiliates crossed a line by attacking a children's hospital in December 2022, it sent shockwaves through the group. Suddenly, the once untouchable gang was looking a lot more vulnerable, and cracks were starting to show in their formerly ironclad facade. But Lockbit wasn't about to let a little internal strife bring them down. No, they were in this game for the long haul, and they had no intention of giving up their hard-earned empire. Even as whispers of dissent echoed through their ranks, the group's leadership remained focused on the prize: total domination of the ransomware world. And for a while there, it seemed like they might just pull it off. Lockbit's attacks were getting bolder and more sophisticated by the day, and their victims were paying out millions in ransom demands. It was like watching a real-life game of Monopoly, with Lockbit scooping up properties left and right and leaving their competitors in the dust. But here's the thing about flying too close to the sun. Eventually, your wings are gonna melt. Alright, let's take a quick breather here and talk about ransomware. For those of you who are new to the world of cybercrime, ransomware is a type of malware that encrypts a victim's files and holds them hostage until a ransom is paid. It's like a digital stick-up, with the attacker demanding payment in exchange for the decryption key that will unlock the victim's files. Now, there are a few different ways that ransomware can spread. Sometimes it's through phishing emails that trick the victim into downloading a malicious attachment. Other times, it's through drive-by downloads, where the victim's computer gets infected just by visiting a compromised website. But one of the most common ways that ransomware spreads is through affiliate programs, like the one that Lockbit was running. Here's how it works. The ransomware creator, in this case Dmitry Koroshev, develops the malware and then recruits affiliates to distribute it. The affiliates are responsible for getting the ransomware onto as many computers as possible, whether that's through phishing emails, malicious ads, or any other means they can think of. And in exchange for their efforts, the affiliates get a cut of the ransom profits, usually around 70–80%. It's a pretty sweet deal for the ransomware creator, who gets to sit back and watch the money roll in without having to get their hands dirty. And for the affiliates, it's a chance to make some serious cash without having to develop their own malware from scratch. Of course, there's always the risk of getting caught, but for a lot of these guys, the potential payoff is worth the gamble. That's the basics of how ransomware and affiliate programs work. With that in mind, let's dive back into the story of Lockbit and see how their empire started to crumble. So, where were we? Oh, right. Lockbit was on the ropes, but if you thought that was the end of their story, think again. These guys were nothing if not resilient, and they weren't about to let a little setback like that keep them down for long. No, see, this was a group that prided itself on its ironclad discipline and unwavering loyalty. They had a strict code of conduct, and they expected their affiliates to follow it to the letter. No attacking hospitals, no going after critical infrastructure. Those were the rules, and if you broke them, you were out. Simple as that. At least, that's how it was supposed to work. That affiliate who attacked the children's hospital in December 2022, that was a real turning point for Lockbit, and not in a good way. Attacking hospitals, schools, and other critical infrastructure is generally considered off-limits, and for good reason. See, even among ransomware gangs, there are certain lines you just don't cross. It's not just about the money at that point, it's about human lives. So when word got out that one of Lockbit's affiliates had gone rogue and targeted a children's hospital, it sent shockwaves through the group. The leadership knew they had to act fast to contain the damage, and they wasted no time in cutting ties with the offending affiliate. In a rare public statement, Lockbit claimed that they had removed the affiliate from their operations and that they had no involvement in the attack. And then, of course, there was the NCA's infiltration of their network in February 2024. That was the real kicker. The moment when everything started to unravel. With their dark web leak sites seized and their attack capabilities crippled, Lockbit was suddenly looking a lot less invincible than they had just a few months earlier. It was a stunning reversal of fortune for a group that had once seemed unstoppable, and it left a lot of people wondering what would happen next. Would Lockbit be able to bounce back from this latest setback, or was this the beginning of the end for the notorious ransomware gang? Only time would tell, but one thing was for sure: the cybersecurity world was watching closely, and everyone was eager to see how this story would play out. So, where were we? Right, Lockbit was on the ropes, reeling from the blow dealt by the UK's National Crime Agency. But if you thought they were going to take that line down, then you don't know Lockbit. Hey there, listener. I hope you're still with me, because this story's about to kick into high gear. I wanted to give you a little teaser of what's coming up next. You see, Lockbit's story doesn't end with the NCA's takedown of their dark web leak site. In fact, that was just the beginning of the end for the notorious ransomware gang. Let's dive into the stunning announcement that rocked the cybersecurity world in May 2024. It's a moment that will go down in history as one of the biggest takedowns of a cybercrime group ever, and it's a story that you won't want to miss. On May 7, 2024, the U.S. dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the cybercrime world. In a joint announcement, They revealed charges and sanctions against none other than Dmitry Khoroshev, the alleged mastermind behind the notorious Lockbit ransomware gang. That's right, the once untouchable Lockbitsup was finally unmasked, and he was facing the full force of international law enforcement. The Department of Justice hit Khoroshev with a staggering 26-count indictment, including charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and intentional damage to protected computers. That's not all. The U.S. also slapped Khoroshev with sanctions, freezing his assets and banning him from traveling to the country. The UK and Australia followed suit, effectively cutting off the alleged cybercriminal from the global financial system. It was a stunning turn of events, and it left many in the cybersecurity world wondering how law enforcement had managed to track down the elusive Lockbit leader. But as it turns out, they had some help from an unlikely source. As part of Operation Kronos, law enforcement had seized control of Lockbit's infrastructure back in February 2024. And in the process they had gained access to a treasure trove of data, including information on the group's affiliates and their activities. Using this data, investigators were able to piece together a detailed picture of Lockbit's operations, including the role that Khoroshev allegedly played in directing the group's activity. They discovered that the 31-year-old Russian national had been living a life of luxury in Voronezh, raking in millions of dollars in illicit ransomware proceeds. But even with the walls closing in, Lockbit wasn't ready to go down without a fight. Before we get to the juicy bits though, I want to take a moment to remind you to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me keep bringing you these wild tales from the front lines of the cybercrime world. Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground already, and you might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all the twists and turns in the Lockbit saga. But stick with me because we're about to get to the really good stuff. So let me ask you this. What do you think about Lockbit's story so far? Are you surprised by how quickly they rose to power, or did you see it coming from a mile away? And what about their downfall? Do you think it was inevitable? Or could they have avoided if they played their cards differently? I'm curious to hear your thoughts, so don't be shy about leaving a comment below. I read every single one, and I love hearing from my listeners. Plus, who knows, your insights might just inspire a future episode of the show. Just 2 weeks after Khoroshev's indictment, the group claimed responsibility for a massive attack on the Canadian retail chain London Drugs, demanding a staggering $25 million ransom. It was a brazen move, and it showed that even with their leader facing serious charges, Lockbit was still a force to be reckoned with. Let's take a step back for a second and put ourselves in the shoes of a security researcher. Imagine you're the one who uncovered the evidence that led to Lockbit's downfall, the smoking gun that tied Dmitry Khoroshev to the group's leadership. Would you take it straight to the authorities, or would you try to use it as leverage to get inside Lockbit's inner circle? What would you do with that information? It's a tough call, and there's no easy answer. On the one hand, you'd be doing the right thing by turning the evidence over to law enforcement. These guys are criminals after all, and they deserve to face justice for their actions. But on the other hand, imagine the intel you could gather. If you could infiltrate Lockbit's ranks, the insider knowledge you could gain about their tactics, their targets, their weaknesses. It's a moral dilemma, to be sure. But that's the thing about the world of cybercrime. It's full of tough choices and gray areas. As a security researcher, you're constantly walking that fine line between doing what's right and doing what's necessary to stay one step ahead of the bad guys. And that's why stories like the one I'm telling you today are so important. They give us a glimpse into the minds of these cybercriminals, help us understand their motivations and their methods. Because at the end of the day, the more we know about our enemy, the better equipped we'll be to fight back. So as we head into the final chapters of the Lockbit saga, I want you to keep that in mind. Put yourself in the shoes of the security researchers, the law enforcement agents, the victims, hell, even the criminals themselves. because the more perspectives we can bring to bear on this story, the more we can learn from it. And I hope you found it as fascinating as I have. The rise and fall of Lockbit is a story that has it all: intrigue, suspense, and a cast of characters that would make even the most hardened cybercriminal blush. But as much as I love this, there's a serious message at the heart of this story. Ransomware attacks like the ones carried out by Lockbit are a growing threat to businesses, organizations, and individuals around the world. And the only way we're going to stop them is by working together to spread awareness and build a culture of cybersecurity. So, here's what I'm asking you to do. First, if you haven't already, hit that like button and share this video with your friends and colleagues. The more people who know about the dangers of ransomware, the better equipped we'll be to fight back against it. I'm always working on new stories and insights from the front lines of the cybercrime world, and I don't want you to miss a single one. Second, take a moment to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And finally, I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me what you thought of the Lockbit story. What do you think the future holds for the ransomware industry as a whole? Don't be shy. Share your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going. Sure, the indictment of Dmitry Khoroshev and the sanctions against his alleged co-conspirators were a major blow to the ransomware gang. And the seizure of their infrastructure and the loss of their affiliates have certainly made it harder for them to operate now with their true identities revealed. But if there's one thing I've learned in my years of cybersecurity, it's that no matter how many times you stomp on them, they always seem to find a way to scurry back out of the shadows, with new exploits or tactics ready for a new victim. And that's the big question mark hanging over the end of the Lockbit story. Will the group try to reinvent itself under a new name with new leadership and a new strategy? Or will the pressure from law enforcement and the loss of their key players be too much for them to overcome? Only time will tell, but one thing is for sure: the fight against ransomware is far from over. As long as there are vulnerable systems and organizations willing to pay up, there will always be cybercriminals looking to make a quick buck.
Imagine waking up one day to find out that your entire digital life has been compromised. Your phone doesn't work, your bank account is drained, and your company's secrets are splashed across the internet. It's the reality of what can happen when nation-state hackers set their sights on you. This isn't science fiction. Today, we're diving deep into the shadowy world of Chinese cyber espionage. We're talking about a massive coordinated effort that's been going on for over a decade, targeting everything from your local phone company to entire countries' power grids. These aren't your run-of-the-mill script kiddies or ransomware gangs. We're dealing with highly skilled state-sponsored hacker groups with names like Mustang Panda, Red Foxtrot, and Nikon. They're patient, they're persistent, and they've got the resources of an entire nation behind them. What's their goal? Information, cold, hard data, military secrets, industrial designs, personal information, anything that can give China an edge on the global stage. Over the next hour, we're going to break down some of the biggest cyber espionage campaigns attributed to China. We'll look at how they get in, what they do once they're inside, and the trail of digital destruction they leave behind. So buckle up, because we're about to take a wild ride through the dark underbelly of the internet, where the stakes are high, the players are skilled, and the consequences are all too real. Operation Soft Cell. All right, let's dive into our first major player. This isn't some short-term hack. We're talking about a campaign that's been running since 2012. That's over a decade of persistent attacks. The group behind this operation goes by a couple of names. Think of them as digital ninjas, sneaking into systems and hanging around undetected for years. Now, these guys aren't targeting your average people. They're going after big fish. Telecommunications providers all over the world. We're talking about the companies that run the networks your phones and internet rely on. In 2023, they pulled off a pretty slick move. They found a way to break into Microsoft Exchange servers. For those who don't know, Exchange is like the post office of the digital world. It handles emails for a lot of big companies. Once they were in, they planted what we call web shells. Imagine these as secret backdoors that let them sneak back in whenever they want. With these in place, they could snoop around, steal passwords, move to other parts of the network, and grab any data they found interesting. But here's where it gets really interesting. They created their own custom version of a tool called Mimikatz. Mimikatz is like a skeleton key for computers. It can help you steal passwords and login info. Their version, which they called MIM221, had some fancy new tricks to avoid getting caught by antivirus software. This is a big deal because it shows these guys aren't just using off-the-shelf hacking tools. They're creating their own, improving them, making them harder to detect. It's like they're running their own RD department for cyber weapons. The impact of all this? We're talking about widespread compromise of telecommunications providers. These companies handle massive amounts of data and communications. If you can get into their systems, you've hit the mother lode of information. Think about it. Every phone call, every text message, every email that passes through these networks, potentially exposed. And not just personal stuff, but business communications, government communications, you name it. This is the kind of access that intelligence agencies dream of. And these soft cell guys, they've had this level of access for years. It's a stark reminder of just how vulnerable our digital infrastructure can be, and how patient and persistent these state-sponsored hackers are. This is just the beginning of our story. Now let's shift gears and talk about another major player in this cyber espionage game. Buckle up, because we're just getting started. The Nikon APT Group. APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat, which is just a fancy way of saying really skilled hackers who don't give up easily. Between 2019 and 2021, these Nikon guys were busy. Their targets? Military organizations in Southeast Asia. We're talking about the kind of places where top-secret battle plans and weapon designs are stored. Real sensitive stuff. To break into these high-security systems, Nikon used some pretty clever tools. They had two main backdoors. Think of these as secret entrances into a computer system. Cool names, right? They called them Nebulae and Rainy Day. But don't let that fool you. These were serious pieces of malware. Now let me break down how they got these backdoors into the systems. They used something called DLL sideloading. DLL stands for Dynamic Link Library. It's basically a set of instructions that programs use to do certain tasks. Sideloading is when you trick a legitimate program into loading a malicious DLL instead of the real one. Imagine you're at a restaurant, and instead of bringing you the meal you ordered, the waiter sneaks in some poison food that looks the same. That's kind of what DLL sideloading does, but with computer programs. Once they were in, these backdoors let the Nikon group do all sorts of nasty stuff. They could snoop around the systems, move to other computers on the network, and most importantly, steal data. We're talking about sensitive military information here. And boy, did they steal data. Battle plans, troop movements, weapon designs. The kind of stuff that could give one country a serious advantage over another in a conflict. This is where things get really serious. It's not just about stealing credit card numbers or personal information anymore. This is nation-state level espionage, the kind of stuff that can shift the balance of power in an entire region. Military secrets, the kind of information countries spend billions trying to protect, were now in the hands of these hackers. The crisis point here is clear. And remember, all signs point to these hackers working for China. That's a game changer in terms of military intelligence and national security. This Nikon operation shows us just how high the stakes are in this cyber espionage game. We're not just talking about individual hackers or criminal gangs anymore. We're dealing with state-sponsored groups with serious skills and resources, going after the most sensitive information they can find. We're still just scratching the surface of this cyber espionage iceberg. Stick around, because it only gets wilder from here. We're about to dive into some seriously scary stuff. We're talking about hackers getting their hands on a country's power grid. In 2020, a group called Redfly pulled off something that sounds like it's straight out of a Hollywood thriller. Yeah, you heard that right. They managed to break into an Asian country's national power grid. And get this, they stayed undetected for 6 whole months. That's half a year of having access to the systems that control an entire nation's electricity. Just let that sink in for a moment. To pull this off, they used a nasty piece of malware called ShadowPad. Think of ShadowPad as a Swiss Army knife for hackers. It can do all sorts of things: steal data, download more malware, even take control of systems remotely. It's the kind of tool that keeps cybersecurity experts up at night. But Redfly didn't stop there. They also used something called Packerloader. It can run special code that helps hackers get deeper into a system and change how things work. This tool is like a lockpick for computers. In this case, they used it to steal passwords and login information. Now imagine having the keys to a country's power grid for 6 months. The potential for chaos is enormous. They could have turned off power to hospitals, military bases, or entire cities with just a few keystrokes. It's the kind of access that could cripple a nation if used maliciously. But let's zoom out a bit, because this Redfly operation wasn't happening in isolation. At the same time, multiple Chinese hacking groups were going after telecom providers all across Asia. We're talking about groups with names like Mustang Panda, Red Foxtrot, and our old friend Nikon. These groups were using a whole toolkit of malware. They had programs called Cool Client, Quick Heal, and Rainy Day. Each of these is like a different kind of digital crowbar, designed to break into systems in unique ways. One particularly clever trick they used involved VLC Media Player. Well, these hackers found a way to use it to sneak their malware onto systems. You know, that program you might use to watch videos on your computer? It's like hiding a bomb in a DVD player, the last place you'd expect to find it. The result of all this? A long-term, widespread compromise of the telecom sector. We're talking about sustained access to the systems that handle phone calls, text messages, and internet traffic for millions of people. The potential for eavesdropping and data theft is staggering. But here's where it gets really wild. Remember how I said these were Chinese hacking groups? Well, it turns out at least one of them has direct ties to the Chinese military. Enter PLA Unit 69010. PLA stands for People's Liberation Army. That's China's military. This unit, operating out of Urumqi in western China, has been running cyber espionage campaigns since at least 2014. Their focus? Central Asia, India, and Pakistan. The group linked to this unit is called Red Foxtrot. Now, usually it's really hard to pin down exactly who's behind these hacks. These guys are pros at covering their tracks. But at Red Foxtrot, they got sloppy with their operational security, and researchers were able to trace their activities back to this specific military unit. They messed up. This is a big deal. This is clear evidence of state-sponsored cyber espionage. We're not just talking about random hackers or even criminal groups anymore. It's digital warfare, plain and simple. We're looking at a coordinated long-term effort by China to compromise critical infrastructure, telecommunications, and military secrets across an entire region. The implications are huge. It's not just about stealing data anymore. It's about gaining strategic advantages on a global scale. And the scariest part, this is just what we know about. It makes you wonder what else might be going on that we haven't uncovered yet. Stay tuned, because we're about to dive into one of the biggest cyber attacks in recent history. All right, strap in because we're about to dive into what might be the biggest cyber attack you've never heard of. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. In 2021, a group called Hafnium, yeah, like the metal, pulled off something that makes most hacks look like child's play. Their target? A Microsoft Exchange server. Now, for those of you who aren't geeks, Exchange Server is like the grand central station of emails for businesses. It's what keeps emails flowing in and out of companies all over the world. And Hafnium found not one, not two, but 4 different ways to break into it that nobody knew about before. In the hacking world, we call these zero-day vulnerabilities. It's like finding a secret door in a bank vault that even the bank doesn't know exists. And Hafnium found 4 of them. But finding these vulnerabilities was just the start. Once they broke in, they planted what we call web shells. Think of these as invisible back doors that let the hackers come and go as they please. They could read emails, steal data, or even use the server to attack other parts of the network. Now here's where it gets really scary. This wasn't just a few companies that got hit. We're talking tens of thousands of businesses, government agencies, and organizations worldwide. The scale of this attack was so massive it actually surpassed the infamous SolarWinds hack, which was already considered one of the worst cyber attacks in history. Microsoft scrambled to release emergency patches, but the damage was done. But wait, there's more. Just when you think these hackers can't get any more sophisticated, along comes a group called EarthPreta in late 2022. These guys, also known as Mustang Panda, decided to switch up their game. They rolled out a whole new set of malware tools with cool names like ToneIns, ToneShell, and Pubload. But don't let the funky names fool you. These are serious pieces of software designed to break into systems and steal data. What makes EarthPreta really stand out is how they're distributing their malware. They're not just sending out spam emails anymore. No, these guys are getting creative. They're hiding their malicious code in fake files and archives, then sharing them through popular cloud services like Dropbox and Google Drive. But here's the kicker. They've started embedding the download link for their malware inside innocent-looking documents. And to really throw off security systems, they're password protecting these files. It's like hiding a bomb in a locked suitcase inside a bank vault. Multiple layers of deception. They're also using a technique called DLL sideloading. Imagine you're expecting a delivery of harmless office supplies, but the delivery guy swaps out the contents for weapons when you're not looking. That's basically what DLL sideloading does, but with computer programs. The crisis point here is clear. What worked for defenders yesterday might be useless tomorrow. These attacks are evolving at a breakneck pace. It's a constant arms race with the hackers always seeming to be one step ahead. This rapid evolution of tactics isn't just a technical problem. We're not dealing with script kiddies in basements anymore. It's a wake-up call for the entire cybersecurity industry. These are highly skilled, well-funded operations that are constantly innovating. And remember all of this, from the Microsoft Exchange hack to EarthPreta's new tricks, is happening against the backdrop of those long-term espionage campaigns we talked about earlier. It's like trying to fight a war on multiple fronts, with the enemy constantly changing tactics. The question now isn't just how we defend against these attacks, but how we stay ahead of them. Because in this digital battlefield, being one step behind could mean the difference between security and catastrophe. All right, we've covered a lot of ground, but now it's time to connect the dots and see the big picture. And let me tell you, it's a picture that would make even the most hardened cybersecurity expert lose sleep. What we're looking at here isn't just a series of isolated incidents. It's a massive coordinated effort by multiple Chinese hacking groups, all working towards the same goal: Global cyber domination. Yeah, I know it sounds like something out of a Bond movie, but the reality is even scarier. We've got Operation Soft Cell hitting telecom providers worldwide. Let's break it down. The Nikon APT Group stealing military secrets from Southeast Asia. Red Fly compromising a national power grid. PLA Unit 69010 targeting Central Asia, India, and Pakistan. The Hafnium Group exploiting Microsoft Exchange servers globally. And Earth, Preda constantly evolving their tactics. Now, imagine all of these operations happening simultaneously. It's like a cyber blitzkrieg, attacking on multiple fronts at once. And the targets? We're talking about telecommunications, power grids, military organizations, and critical infrastructure. They're not random. These are the systems that keep our modern world running. The impact of these campaigns is staggering. Think about it. They've potentially got access to global communications networks, allowing them to eavesdrop on phone calls, read text messages, and intercept emails. Power grids, giving them the ability to potentially disrupt electricity supply to entire regions. Military secrets, including troop movements, weapon designs, and strategic plans. Critical infrastructure, which could include everything from water treatment plants to transportation systems. And here's the kicker. In many cases, they've had this access for years. We're not talking about quick smash-and-grab operations. These are long-term, persistent campaigns designed to siphon off as much data as possible over extended periods. But it's not just the breadth of these attacks that's alarming. It's the sophistication. These groups are using cutting-edge techniques, constantly evolving their tactics to stay one step ahead of defenders. They're creating custom malware, exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities, and using innovative distribution methods that make detection incredibly difficult. And let's not forget the resources behind these operations. We are talking about state-sponsored hacking groups with the backing of one of the world's largest economies. They've got the time, money, and manpower to play the long game, slowly and methodically compromising systems around the globe. The revelation of the scale and sophistication of these operations is a wake-up call for the entire world. It's clear that we're not just dealing with isolated incidents or opportunistic cybercriminals. This is a coordinated strategic effort to gain a significant advantage in the digital realm. And here's the scary part. What we've uncovered might just be the tip of the iceberg. How many systems have already been compromised without our knowledge? For every operation we've detected, how many more are still running unnoticed? This convergence of multiple cyber espionage campaigns represents a new era in digital warfare. It's not just about stealing data anymore. It's about gaining the ability to control or disrupt critical systems on a global scale. It's about shifting the balance of power in the digital age. The implications are enormous, not just for cybersecurity, but for geopolitics, national security, and the very fabric of our interconnected world. As we move forward, the question isn't just how we defend against these attacks, but how we reshape our entire approach to cybersecurity in the face of this overwhelming threat. We've seen the threat, we've witnessed the damage. Now let's talk about what's being done about it. First up, let's talk about the international response. When news of these attacks broke, it was like kicking over an anthill. Governments and cybersecurity agencies worldwide started scrambling. We're talking emergency meetings, task forces, the whole 9 yards. One of the big moves was information sharing. See, in the cyber world, knowledge is power. The more you know about an attack, the better you can defend against it. So countries started pooling their intel, trying to piece together the full picture of what these Chinese hacking groups were up to. But it wasn't just governments. The cybersecurity community, those unsung heroes of the digital world, they stepped up big time. We're talking about researchers, Ethical hackers and security firms all putting their heads together to figure out how to stop these attacks. They started reverse engineering the malware, picking it apart piece by piece to understand how it works. It's like taking apart a bomb to figure out how to defuse it. This gave us valuable insights into the hackers' tactics and helped create better defenses. First off, patching. You know how your phone is always bugging you to update? Well, turns out that's pretty important. A lot of these attacks exploited known vulnerabilities that could have been prevented if systems were up to date. So lesson number 1. Patch early, patch often. Next up, multi-factor authentication. It's like having a second lock on your door. Even if the bad guys get your password, they still can't get in without that second key. This could have stopped a lot of these attacks in their tracks. Then there's the principle of least privilege. It's a fancy way of saying, don't give people access to stuff they don't need. If someone only needs to use the printer, don't give them the keys to the entire network. This limits the damage a hacker can do if they compromise an account. But perhaps the biggest lesson was the importance of continuous monitoring. These attacks went undetected for months, sometimes years. That's like having a burglar living in your attic and not noticing. So companies started beefing up their monitoring systems, looking for any signs of unusual activity. We're talking about some serious upgrades here. Now, for the defensive measures. First, there's been a big push toward zero trust architecture. It's a fancy term that basically means trust no one, verify everything. Every user, every device, every connection is treated as potentially compromised. It's paranoid, sure, but in this case, a little paranoia goes a long way. Then there's the increased use of AI and machine learning in cybersecurity. These systems can analyze massive amounts of data and spot patterns that humans might miss. It's like having a super smart watchdog that never sleeps. Companies also started investing more in threat hunting. Instead of just waiting for alarms to go off, they're actively looking for signs of intrusion. It's like hiring a detective to patrol your house instead of just relying on a burglar alarm. Despite all these efforts, we're still facing some major challenges. But let's be real here. For one, these Chinese hacking groups aren't slowing down. They're constantly evolving their tactics, coming up with new ways to bypass our defenses. It's like playing whack-a-mole, but the moles are getting smarter every time. Then there's the sheer scale of the problem. We're talking about attacks on a global scale, targeting everything from mom-and-pop shops to major corporations and government agencies. Defending everything is a massive undertaking. And let's not forget the skills gap. There just aren't enough cybersecurity professionals to go around. It's like trying to fight a war with half your army missing. Looking ahead, the outlook is, well, it's complicated. On one hand, we're getting better at defending against these attacks. We're more aware of the threat, we're developing better tools, and we're working together more effectively. But on the other hand, the attacks are getting more sophisticated, more frequent, and more damaging. It's an arms race, and right now, it's not clear who's winning. One thing's for sure, though. This isn't a problem that's going away. We've been on quite a journey through the dark underbelly of cyber espionage. Let's wrap this up and try to make sense of what we've learned. First off, you might be wondering, what's the end game here? Why are these Chinese hacking groups going after all these targets? Well, here's the kicker. We're not entirely sure. The primary motive behind these intrusions isn't crystal clear at this stage. But let's be real. It's not hard to connect the dots. Chinese threat actors have a long history of targeting the telecoms sector worldwide. Think about it. If you can tap into the communications networks of entire countries, you've hit the intelligence jackpot. It's like having a skeleton key to the world's secrets. Phone calls, text messages, emails, all up for grabs. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when you consider the other sectors they're hitting. Military organizations, power grids, critical infrastructure, the potential for information gathering, and let's face it, potential disruption is enormous. Now here's something that'll make your head spin. These Chinese operations, they're not as coordinated as you might think. In fact, they've got this almost redundant style where multiple threat groups often attack the same targets, and they're not even working together. It's like having several burglars break into the same house, each thinking they're the only one there. Cybersecurity experts have found multiple Chinese threat groups hanging out in the same victims' systems, completely unaware of each other. You'd think with all the resources at their disposal, they'd coordinate better. It's bizarre, right? But in a weird way, this uncoordinated approach might actually work in their favor. It's like throwing a bunch of darts at a dartboard. You're bound to hit the bullseye eventually. Now, let's talk about the future, because the landscape of cyber espionage is evolving faster than we can keep up. They've got an ace up their sleeve. And China? There's this law in China that requires companies operating in the country to disclose security flaws in their products to the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. On the surface, it sounds like a good thing, right? Catching and fixing vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. But here's the catch. This law allows China to stockpile these vulnerabilities. It's like they're building an arsenal of digital weapons. And you can bet they're not just sitting on this information. They're using it to help their state hackers increase operational tempo, success, and scope. In plain English, they're making their hackers faster, more successful, and able to hit more targets. This is a game changer. It means Chinese hackers potentially have access to zero-day vulnerabilities. Those are the ones that nobody else knows about yet, for a wide range of products. It's like they've got a cheat code for the internet. So where does this leave us? Well, to be blunt, we're in for a wild ride. The world of cyber espionage is only going to get more complex, more dangerous, and more impactful on our daily lives. We're not just talking about stolen passwords or credit card numbers anymore. We're talking about potential disruptions to power grids, compromised military secrets, and the possibility of entire communication networks being monitored. The digital and physical worlds are more intertwined than ever, and these cyber attacks have real-world consequences. But here's the thing. Knowledge is power. By understanding these threats, by staying informed and vigilant, we can all play a part in defending against them. Whether you're a cybersecurity professional, business owner, or just someone who uses the internet, and let's face it, that's all of us. We all have a role to play. So keep your software updated, use strong passwords, be wary of suspicious emails, and stay informed about the latest threats. Because in this new digital battlefield, we're all on the front line. And remember, in the world of cyber espionage, the game never ends. It just evolves. Stay safe out there.
In the darkest depths of the internet, a new threat was emerging. With each passing day, it grew stronger, more insatiable. Its name, Scattered Spider, or UNC 3944. They were cunning, ruthless, and always one step ahead of the game. As they spun their web of deceit, ensnaring unsuspecting victims left and right, one thing became clear. Scattered Spider are a ruthless group of criminal hackers. What did they want? That's what we're here to find out. So tune in, because the story of Scattered Spider is one you won't soon forget. All right? So let's dive into the origins of Scattered Spider. Like any great villain, they started small. Imagine a group of recluses huddled around their computers in some dark corner of the web. They're cutting their teeth on phishing scams and SIM swaps, targeting unsuspecting telcos and their customers. For those of you who don't know, phishing is when a hacker sends out a fake email or text message, trying to trick you into giving up your personal information. They might pretend to be your bank, or your email provider, or even a government agency. The goal is to get you to click on a link or download an attachment that'll infect your computer with malware. SIM swapping, on the other hand, is when a hacker convinces your phone carrier to transfer your phone number to a new SIM card that they control. Once they have your number, they can use it to bypass two-factor authentication and gain access to your online accounts. These were the tools of the trade for Scattered Spider in their early days. But like any creature tasting first blood, once they got a bite of success, they started craving bigger prey. In the summer of 2022, Scattered Spider launched a meticulously crafted phishing campaign that targeted the employees of some of the biggest names in tech: Twilio, MailChimp, and LastPass. For those of you who aren't familiar, Twilio is a cloud communications platform that powers the messaging and voice services of companies like Uber and Airbnb. MailChimp is an email marketing service used by millions of businesses around the world. And LastPass is a password manager that stores all your login credentials in one secure vault. By targeting the employees of these companies, Scattered Spider was able to gain access to a treasure trove of sensitive data and source code. It was like they'd hit the jackpot, a feast fit for a king in the world of cybercrime. But here's the thing. As big as this attack was, it was just the beginning. Little did the world know, Scattered Spider was just getting started. They had bigger plans in the works, and this was merely an appetizer for the main course to come. As the calendar flipped to 2023, the true extent of Scattered Spider's ambitions began to come into focus. Remember that LastPass breach we talked about earlier? Well, it turns out that was just the tip of the iceberg. The hackers had used the stolen data from the LastPass breach as a foothold, a way to worm their way deeper into the company's systems. You see, LastPass isn't just any old password manager. It's used by millions of people around the world to store their most sensitive information, everything from login credentials to credit card numbers to personal documents. Using the stolen data as their silk, the hackers spun a web of deceit that allowed them to bypass LastPass's security measures and gain access to the company's most sensitive data. They pilfered priceless vaults of customer passwords and personal information, all while remaining undetected. It was a stunning breach, one that sent shockwaves through the cybersecurity community. For Scattered Spider, they didn't care about the tens of thousands of lives they're ruining. So as the world reeled from the LastPass breach, Scattered Spider was already moving on to their next target. They were like a spider spinning its web, each strand carefully placed to ensnare its next victim. But what was their endgame? What were they building towards with all of the stolen data and ill-gotten gains? That was the question on everyone's mind as 2023 dawned, and Scattered Spider showed no signs of slowing down. The only thing that was clear was that this was a group to be reckoned with, a formidable adversary with the skills, the resources, and the determination to pull off some of the most audacious hacks in history. And as their web grew ever wider, the world could only watch and wait to see where they would strike next. All right, let's take a breather here for a moment and talk about some of the key concepts that keep coming up in the Scattered Spider store. If you're not familiar with the world of cybersecurity, some of these terms might be going over your head. But don't worry, I've got you covered. First up, let's talk about MFA. That stands for multi-factor authentication, and it's basically an extra layer of security that you can add to your online accounts. Instead of just entering a password, you'll also need to provide a second form of identification, like a code sent to your phone or a fingerprint scan. It's a simple step that can make it a lot harder for hackers to break into your accounts. But here's the thing, even MFA isn't foolproof. Hackers are always coming up with new ways to get around it, like using social engineering tactics to trick people into giving up their codes. That's why it's important to stay vigilant and keep an eye out for any suspicious activity on your accounts. Next, let's talk about supply chain attacks. This is when a hacker targets a company not by going after them directly, but by infiltrating one of their suppliers or partners. Think of it like a burglar who gets into your house not by breaking down the front door, but by sneaking in through an unlocked window in your garage. Supply chain attacks can be particularly devastating because they allow hackers to access a wide range of companies and systems through a single entry point. And once they're in, they can be very difficult to detect and root out. Finally, let's talk about social engineering. This is when a hacker uses psychological manipulation to trick people into giving up sensitive information or taking actions that compromise their security. It can take many forms, from phishing emails to phone scams to in-person impersonation. The key to defending against social engineering is to be aware of the tactics that hackers use and to always be on your guard. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And if you're ever unsure about the legitimacy of a request, don't be afraid to double-check with the person or company directly through a trusted channel. So, those are some of the key concepts that you need to know to understand the Scattered Spider story. But that this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to cybersecurity. There's always more to learn, and staying informed is one of the best ways to protect yourself and your organization from the ever-evolving threat of cybercrime. Now, where were we? Oh right, Scattered Spider's magnum opus. Just when you thought these hackers couldn't get any more audacious, they went and pulled off a heist that would make Ocean's 11 blush. It's 2023, and the bright lights of Las Vegas are shining like a beacon in the desert. The city's biggest casinos, MGM Resorts and Caesars Entertainment, are raking in millions from high rollers and tourists alike. But little do they know, a different kind of gambler is about to take them for everything they're worth. Enter Scattered Spider, armed with a new weapon in their arsenal, the fearsome ransomware of the Alpha Gang. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with ransomware, it's a type of malware that encrypts a victim's files and demands payment in exchange for the decryption key. It's like a digital hostage situation, and it can be incredibly lucrative for the attackers. And that's exactly what Scattered Spider had in mind when they set their sights on MGM and Caesars. But first they needed a way in, and that's where their mastery of MFA bypasses came into play. You see, these hackers had figured out a way to get around multi-factor authentication by bombarding their targets with requests until they found a weak spot. It's like a brute force attack, but instead of trying to guess a password, they're trying to find a way to bypass the extra security measures. And boy, did it work. Scattered Spider was able to breach the digital defenses of both MGM and Caesars, gaining access to their systems and unleashing the Alpha ransomware. The gaming giants were caught completely off guard and soon found themselves in a desperate negotiation with the hackers. In the end, Caesars ended up paying a staggering $15 million to Scattered Spider in exchange for the decryption key. MGM, to their credit, refused to pay the ransom. But the damage was done, and the story made headlines around the world. It was a stunning display of just how far Scattered Spider was willing to go to achieve their goals. And it left many in the cybersecurity world wondering, what could possibly be next for this group of master hackers? Little did they know, the answer to that question was already starting to take shape, because even as Scattered Spider was basking in the glow of their latest victory, the threads of their web were starting to unravel, and the hunters were about to become the hunted. You know, as I've been telling you the story of Scattered Spider, I can't help but wonder what drives these hackers to do what they do. I mean, sure, money is obviously a big factor. With the kind of ransoms they were pulling in, you could buy a small island and still have change left over for a yacht or two. But is it really just about the cash? Or is there something else at play here? Think about it. To pull off the kind of hacks that Scattered Spider did, you need more than just technical skills. You need creativity, patience, and a willingness to take risks that would make most people run screaming in the opposite direction. So what is it that motivates these faceless marauders? Is it the thrill of the challenge, the rush of adrenaline that comes with taking on some of the biggest targets in the world? Or is it something deeper, a desire to prove themselves in a world that's increasingly dominated by technology? Maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe for some of these hackers, it's about the money and the glory, the chance to make a name for themselves in a shadowy underworld where reputation is everything. But for others, maybe it's about something more intangible, a sense of purpose, or even a twisted kind of idealism. After all, we've seen time and time again that hackers can be a strange breed. Some of them see themselves as digital Robin Hoods, stealing from the rich and powerful to give to the poor, or at least to themselves. Others might justify their actions as a form of protest against a system they see as corrupt or unjust. But whatever their motivations, one thing is clear. As Scattered Spider's exploits escalated, so too did the risks they were taking. They were like high-wire artists, dancing on a razor's edge between triumph and disaster. And the higher they climbed, the farther they had to fall. It's a pattern we've seen play out time and time again in the world of cybercrime. The more successful a hacker or group becomes, the more attention they attract from law enforcement and rival groups alike. And sooner or later, something's gotta give. And then, just like that, the first domino fell. In January 2024, a young hacker by the name of Noah Urban found himself in the crosshairs of law enforcement. Urban, it turned out, was one of Scattered Spider's foot soldiers, a low-level operator who had been caught red-handed in a scheme to steal credit card numbers from unsuspecting victims. But Urban's arrest was just the beginning. As investigators dug deeper, they started to unravel the tangled web of Scattered Spider's operations. Piece by piece, they assembled a picture of a vast criminal enterprise with tentacles that stretched across the globe. At the center of it all was a shadowy figure known only as Tyler. For months, authorities had been trying to put a name to this elusive mastermind, but he had always managed to stay one step ahead of them. But now, with Urban in custody and singing like a canary, they finally had the break they needed. In June 2024, the hammer finally fell. In a coordinated international operation, law enforcement agencies from the US, UK, and Canada swooped in on Tyler Buchanan, the 22-year-old wunderkind behind the Scattered Spider moniker. Buchanan, it turned out, had been living a double life. By day, he was a computer science student at a prestigious university in London. But by night, he was the mastermind behind some of the most audacious hacks in history, pulling the strings of a vast criminal empire from his dorm room. When authorities finally caught up with him, Buchanan was on the run, desperately trying to flee the country with a fortune in ill-gotten gain. But there was nowhere left to hide. In a dramatic showdown at Heathrow Airport, Buchanan was arrested and extradited to the US to face a long list of charges. As the dust settled, the true scope of Scattered Spider's crimes began to come into focus. Investigators discovered that Buchanan and his crew had amassed a staggering $27 million in cryptocurrency, all of it stolen from their countless victims over the years. It was a stunning fall from grace for a group that had once seemed untouchable. But as Buchanan learned the hard way, no one is above the law forever. And now, at the tender age of 22, he was facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars. So what can we learn from the rise and fall of Scattered Spider? Well, for starters, it's a powerful reminder of just how vulnerable we all are in the digital age. No matter how big or small your organization is, no matter how secure you think your systems are, there's always a risk of falling victim to a cyber attack. So what can you do? Well, for starters, make sure you're keeping all your software and systems up to date with the latest patches and security fixes. I know it can be a hassle, but trust me, it's worth it. Those patches are there for a reason, and they can go a long way towards closing the gaps that hackers like Scattered Spider are always looking to exploit. Next, educate yourself and your team about the latest threats and tactics. The more you know about things like phishing scams, social engineering, and MFA bypasses, the better equipped you'll be to spot them when they come your way. And don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. There are plenty of resources out there, from online courses to professional training programs, that can help you stay on top of the latest trends. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, don't let your guard down. The boss behind Scattered Spider may be behind bars, but there are plenty of others out there just waiting for their moment to strike.
In the bustling streets of Pyongyang, North Korea, 3 young IT professionals, Jiho Han, Haoran Shu, and Chunji Jin, gathered in a dimly lit apartment. The room was Spartan, with only a few outdated computers and a flickering fluorescent light illuminating their faces. They spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting nervously towards the door. "The plan is set," Jiho said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our contacts in the United States and Ukraine have everything in place." Haron nodded, his fingers tapping anxiously on the table. "Christina Chapman and Alexander Didenko," he said, reciting the names like a mantra. "They'll be our key to infiltrating the American companies." Chunji leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. The 3 men were part of a secret scheme orchestrated by the North Korean government to fraudulently obtain remote IT jobs at U.S. companies. Their goal was simple: to generate revenue for their country's weapons programs, including the development of ballistic missiles and other military technologies. For years, North Korean IT workers had been seeking freelance employment contracts in North America, Europe, and East Asia, with many of them operating as expats in China and Russia. But now, with the help of their foreign collaborators and cutting-edge hacking tools, they were ready to take their operation to the next level. As the sun rose over the city, Jiho, Haoran, and Chunji set their plan into motion. Using stolen identities of over 60 U.S. persons, they began applying for remote IT positions at hundreds of American companies. The first few weeks were a blur of activity as the trio worked tirelessly to create fake resumes, craft convincing cover letters, and prepare for virtual job interviews. They used generative AI tools to help them build believable backgrounds and experiences, drawing from the stolen identities to create a veneer of legitimacy. To their surprise, the plan worked better than they could have imagined. The stolen identities, combined with their technical skills and the assistance of generative AI, allowed them to breeze through the hiring process at company after company. As the weeks turned into months, the North Korean workers found themselves gainfully employed at some of the most prestigious companies in the United States. They had landed jobs at a top 5 television network, a Silicon Valley tech giant, an aerospace and defense contractor, a major car manufacturer, a luxury retail store, and a renowned media and entertainment company. But even as they celebrated their success, the trio knew that their work was just the tip of the iceberg. You see, they were a part of Lazarus Group, one of the world's most notorious hacking organizations, originating from no other than North Korea. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea is home to Lazarus Group, also known by other names such as Guardians of Peace or Whose Team. They were the attackers behind the WannaCry ransomware attack. They infected approximately 200,000 computers in 150 countries in May 2017 and is regarded as one of the biggest cyber attacks in history. Lazarus Group simultaneously was preparing to deploy a new remote access Trojan called Kaolin Rat. This malware, designed to evade detection and grant them full control over infected systems, would be the key to exfiltrating sensitive data and funneling money back to their handlers in Pyongyang. As the Kaolin Rat began to spread, the group could feel the excitement building. They were on the cusp of something big, and the thought of the wealth and prestige that awaited them was intoxicating. But little did they know that their actions had already caught the attention of U.S. authorities, who were slowly closing in on their operation. The stage was set for a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, as Lazarus Group raced to achieve their goals, while staying one step ahead of the law. The future of their mission and the fate of their country's weapons programs hung in the balance. Back to the three North Korean hackers, they settled into their new roles at various U.S. companies, and they began to lay the groundwork for the next phase of their operation. Unbeknownst to their unsuspecting colleagues, they were secretly communicating with the Lazarus Group, who have a long history of using fake job offer lures to deliver malware. In the summer of 2023, the Lazarus Group started targeting individuals in the Asia region with fabricated job offers. These lures, delivered through various social media and instant messaging platforms, were designed to trick targets into downloading and executing a new remote access Trojan called Kowloon Rat. It's likely this is a part of their Operation Dream Job campaign that's been ongoing since 2021. Jiho, Haoran, and Chunji watched with growing excitement as the Kowloon Rat began to spread, infiltrating systems across the region. The malware, designed to evade detection by security software, granted them unprecedented access to infected computers, allowing them to change file timestamps, load additional malware, and exfiltrate sensitive data. But the Kowloon Rat was just the beginning. The North Korean hackers had their sights set on an even more ambitious goal, delivering the FUD module rootkit through their first stage rat. It is a powerful piece of malware that will grant them complete control over compromised systems. To deliver the FUD module rootkit, the hackers exploited a recently patched vulnerability, which allowed them to gain kernel-level, read-write access, and disable security mechanisms. This vulnerability, rated with a CVSS score of 7.8, represented a significant threat to any unpatched systems. As the FUD module rootkit took hold, the North Korean hackers could now operate with impunity, stealing data, monitoring communications, and laying the groundwork for future attacks. The money generated from their illicit activities flowed back to Pyongyang, fueling the country's weapons programs and bolstering its military capabilities. But even as the North Korean hackers celebrated their success, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Microsoft suddenly disclosed the existence of Rollsling, a sophisticated piece of malware used by the Lazarus Group to exploit a critical vulnerability in JetBrains TeamCity CVE 2023-42793. CVSS score 9.8. The shellcode downloaded by the Lazarus Group's payload was believed to launch Rollsling, a DLL-based loader designed to retrieve and launch Rollsling. This discovery sent shockwaves through the cybersecurity community as it revealed the growing sophistication and boldness of North Korean hacking operations. As the investigation into the Lazarus Group's activities intensified, U.S. authorities began to close in on the North Korean hackers and their co-conspirators. They discovered that Rollsling, the malware disclosed by Microsoft, was just the tip of the iceberg. Further analysis revealed that Rollsling executed directly in memory, triggering the execution of another loader called RollMid. This loader, also run in the system's memory, communicated with multiple command and control C2 servers using steganography to retrieve the Kowloon Rat payload. Once the Kowloon Rat was in place, it set up communication with its C2 server and prepared for the deployment of the FUD module rootkit. The hackers had created a sophisticated multi-stage infection chain that allowed them to penetrate deep into their target's systems, stealing data and causing untold damage. As the true extent of the North Korean hacking operation came to light, Jiho, Haoran, and Chunji knew that their time was running out. They had pushed their luck too far, and now the full might of the U.S. government was bearing down on them. The once invincible Lazarus Group found itself on the defensive, scrambling to cover its tracks and evade detection. But it was only a matter of time before the dominoes fell. On May 7, 2024, Alexander Didenko, the Ukrainian national who had played a crucial role in the fraudulent job scheme, was arrested in Poland. U.S. authorities immediately began the process of seeking his extradition, determined to bring him to justice for his crimes. Just over a week later, on May 16, 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice unsealed the damning indictment, charging Christina Chapman, Oleksandr Didenko, and the 3 North Korean hackers with fraud related to the remote job scheme. The document laid bare the extent of their crimes, detailing how they had stolen the identities of over 60 Americans and generated millions of dollars in illicit revenue for the North Korean regime. As the news of the indictment spread, law enforcement agents were already moving to apprehend the suspects. In a dramatic early morning raid, Christina Chapman was arrested at her home in Litchfield Park, Arizona. She was taken into custody without incident, her once promising career as a cybercriminal mastermind brought to an abrupt and ignominious end. With Chapman and Didenko in custody, the focus shifted to the 3 North Korean hackers who had managed to evade capture. The U.S. State Department, recognizing the severity of their crimes and the threat they posed to national security, took the unprecedented step of issuing a $5 million reward for information leading to their arrest. As the hunt for the North Korean hackers intensified, the State Department also unveiled a new round of sanctions against 5 Russian entities accused of facilitating weapons transfers from North Korea to Russia. The sanctions, a response to the growing military alliance between Moscow and Pyongyang, aimed to cut off the flow of funds and resources that had enabled the North Korean regime to develop its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. The sanctions, combined with the high-profile arrests and the ongoing manhunt, dealt a devastating blow to the Lazarus Group and its affiliates. The once feared hacking organization found itself on the defensive, its members scattered, and its operations crippled by the relentless pressure of international law enforcement. The true extent of the North Korean hacking operation came into focus. Investigators revealed that the workers involved in the remote job fraud scheme were linked to the country's munitions industry department, a shadowy organization responsible for overseeing the development of ballistic missiles, weapons production, and research and development programs. The scheme, which had generated millions of dollars in revenue for the North Korean regime, was believed to be a key source of funding for these illicit activities. By infiltrating U.S. companies and siphoning off funds, the hackers had effectively been subsidizing the development of weapons that posed a direct threat to international security. The investigation also uncovered the involvement of Min Fuan Vong, a U.S. citizen from Maryland who had conspired with Chapman and the North Korean hackers to commit wire fraud. On had been securing jobs for North Korean workers and using generative AI tools to create fake resumes and ace interviews. He had also been pocketing a portion of their salaries before sending the rest to the North Korean regime. The arrests of Vong and the others involved in the scheme served as a somber reminder of the growing threat posed by cybercrime and the need for continued vigilance in the face of an ever-evolving landscape of threats. For Jiho Han, Shunji Jin, Haoran Shu, and their manager Janhua, if these are their real names, they most likely will never face any repercussions. Since they are operating under the North Korean regime and most likely reside in North Korea, they likely will never be caught. In December 2019, researchers at BlackBerry Cylance, a leading cybersecurity firm, released a report on the Zeppelin ransomware. The findings from the Cylance report piqued the interest of Unit 221B, a cybersecurity consulting company based in New Jersey. The team at Unit 221B, known for their expertise in reverse engineering malware, began their own investigation into Zeppelin. as they skimmed over the code and analyzed the ransomware's behavior. Encouraged by this discovery, the Unit 221B researchers started working on a proof-of-concept tool that could exploit vulnerabilities in the code and decrypt files locked by Zeppelin. However, they soon realized that the process was more complex than initially anticipated. The flaws in Zeppelin's encryption were subtle and required a deep understanding of cryptography to exploit effectively. As the Unit 221B team wrestled with the technical challenges of developing their decryption tool, new evidence emerged suggesting that Zeppelin was being deployed through compromised managed service providers, MSPs. MSPs are companies that remotely manage infrastructure and services for other businesses, making them an attractive target for cybercriminals. By infiltrating an MSP and using its network access to deploy Zeppelin, attackers could compromise multiple victim organizations simultaneously. This tactic, reminiscent of the Sodinokibi ransomware campaign, allowed the Zeppelin operators to maximize their impact and potential profits. The revelation of the MSP angle added a new layer of complexity to the Zeppelin investigation. It raised questions about how the attackers were gaining initial access to these providers and whether they were exploiting known vulnerabilities or using stolen credentials. The use of MSPs as a delivery mechanism also suggested a level of sophistication and planning that set Zeppelin apart from more opportunistic ransomware campaigns. As Unit 221B continued their work on the decryption tool, they grappled with the ethical implications of their research. On one hand, publishing their findings could alert the Zeppelin operators to the flaws in their encryption and prompt them to release a patched version of the malware. On the other hand, keeping the information secret meant that victims of Zeppelin would have no recourse but to pay the ransom or risk losing their data permanently. After much deliberation, the Unit 221B team made the difficult decision to delay publishing their research. Instead, they focused their efforts on refining the decryption tool and quietly reaching out to Zeppelin victims through trusted channels. By providing the tool to affected organizations on a case-by-case basis, Unit 221B hoped to help them recover their files without tipping off the attackers. As the months passed, the Zeppelin ransomware continued to evolve, with new versions and features being released at a steady pace. In March 2021, the cybersecurity community was rocked by a major announcement from the Zeppelin developers. They revealed that the latest version of their ransomware was now available for purchase at a price of $2,300 per core build, a significant increase from previous offerings. The news sent shockwaves through the industry as experts scrambled to assess the implications of this development. The high price tag suggested that the Zeppelin operators were confident in their product and believed that there was a strong demand for their ransomware among cybercriminals. Just a month later, in April 2021, the Zeppelin developers released yet another update. This new variant included minor feature changes and improvements to the encryption process, making it even more difficult for victims to recover their files without paying the ransom. In a chilling message accompanying the release, the developers assured their subscribers that they would continue to receive regular updates and special treatment. This statement hinted at the existence of a loyal customer base and the prospect of ongoing Zeppelin attacks in the future. As the Unit 221B team raced to keep pace with the evolving threat, they knew that they were engaged in a high-stakes battle against a determined and resourceful adversary. With each passing day, the pressure mounted to complete their decryption tool and provide a lifeline to the growing number of Zeppelin victims around the world. The cybersecurity community held its collective breath as the Zeppelin ransomware continued to evolve and adapt. In March 2021, the developers behind the malicious software made a bold announcement. The latest version of Zeppelin was now available for purchase at a staggering price of $2,300 per core build. This news sent shockwaves through the industry as experts scrambled to assess the implications of this development. The exorbitant price tag suggested that the Zeppelin operators were confident in their product and believed there was a strong demand for their ransomware among cybercriminals. It was a chilling reminder of the growing sophistication and profitability of the ransomware as a service. Just a month later, in April 2021, the Zeppelin developers released yet another update. This new variant included minor feature changes and improvements to the encryption process, making it even more challenging for victims to recover their files without paying the ransom. The update served as a clear signal that the Zeppelin team was committed to staying ahead of the curve and maintaining their grip on the ransomware market. In a chilling message accompanying the release, the developers assured their subscribers that they would continue to receive regular updates and special treatment. This statement hinted at the existence of a loyal customer base and the prospect of ongoing Zeppelin attacks in the future. It was a stark reminder of the lucrative nature of the ransomware business and the lengths to which cybercriminals were willing to go to ensure their success. As the Zeppelin threat continued to loom large, the cybersecurity community knew that they needed to act fast. The stakes had never been higher, with the ransomware now targeting a wide range of industries, from healthcare and education to defense contractors and beyond. The pressure was on to find a way to stop Zeppelin in its tracks and protect the countless organizations and individuals at risk. Behind the scenes, the researchers at Unit 21B were locked in a race against time. They had been working tirelessly on their secret decryption tool, exploiting the vulnerabilities they had discovered in Zeppelin's encryption mechanism. But with each passing day, the risk of the Zeppelin developers patching those flaws grew ever greater. The Unit 221B team knew that they needed to act soon or risk losing their window of opportunity. They poured all of their energy and expertise into refining the decryption tool, testing it against the latest versions of Zeppelin, and ensuring that it could withstand the most advanced security measures. As the weeks turned into months, the tension continued to mount. The Zeppelin attacks showed no signs of slowing down, and the ransom demands grew ever more exorbitant. Organizations around the world were left reeling, their data held hostage and their operations ground to a halt. But even as the situation seemed to grow more dire by the day, there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon. The researchers at Unit 221B were making steady progress on their decryption tool, and they knew that they were close to a breakthrough. In the end, it all came down to a matter of timing. The Unit 221B team needed to release their tool at just the right moment, when it would have the greatest impact and the lowest risk of being countered by the Zeppelin developers. They watched the ransomware landscape with bated breath, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. As the cybersecurity world held its collective breath, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown between the forces of good and evil. The fate of countless organizations and individuals hung in the balance, and the outcome of the battle would have far-reaching implications for the future of cybersecurity. Only time would tell who would emerge victorious in this high-stakes game of cat and mouse. The cybersecurity community braced itself for the final confrontation, knowing that the outcome would shape the course of the ransomware threat for years to come. The climax of the Zeppelin saga was rapidly approaching, and the tension was palpable. The countdown to the decisive moment had begun, and the world watched with a mixture of fear and anticipation. As the Zeppelin ransomware continued to wreak havoc across industries, the tide began to turn on August 12, 2022. On that fateful day, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, released a joint advisory on Zeppelin, confirming the extensive reach and impact of the malware. The advisory revealed that Zeppelin had been used to target a wide range of organizations, from defense contractors and educational institutions to healthcare and medical industries, from 2019 through at least June 2022. The CISA report shed light on the tactics employed by the Zeppelin actors, revealing that they gained initial access to victim networks through a variety of methods, including remote desktop protocol (RDP) exploitation, SonicWall firewall vulnerabilities, and phishing campaigns. The ransom demands, which ranged from thousands to over $1 million, underscored the severity of the threat and the financial toll it was taking on affected organizations. The CISA advisory marked a turning point in the fight against Zeppelin, galvanizing the cybersecurity community and bringing renewed attention to the ongoing battle against ransomware. It was a clear signal that the threat posed by Zeppelin could no longer be ignored, and that concerted action was needed to combat the malware and protect vulnerable organizations. Seizing the momentum created by the CISA report, the researchers at Unit 221B knew that the time had come to reveal their secret weapon. On November 15, 2022, the cybersecurity firm published a detailed analysis of the encryption vulnerabilities they had discovered in Zeppelin, along with a bombshell announcement. They had been using a custom-built decryption tool based on these flaws to help victims recover their files for free since 2020. The revelation sent shockwaves through the cybercrime underground as Zeppelin operators realized that their once invincible malware had been compromised. The publication of the encryption flaws and the existence of a free decryption tool dealt a severe blow to the Zeppelin operation, as victims no longer felt pressured to pay the ransom to regain access to their data. In the weeks and months that followed, Zeppelin activity declined significantly, as the malware's effectiveness and profitability were severely undermined. The impact of Unit 221B's disclosure was swift and dramatic. The cybersecurity community hailed the development as a major victory in the ongoing fight against ransomware, and praised Unit 221B for their tireless efforts to combat the threat. However, the celebration was short-lived. In December 2023, just over a year after Unit 21B's revelations, a new threat emerged. A threat actor known as Ret offered the source code and builder for Zeppelin version 2 for sale on a hacking forum for a mere $500. The low price and the inclusion of a cracked version of the encryption module suggested that Zeppelin's reign of terror was coming to an end. But the sale also raised concerns among cybersecurity experts. The availability of the Zeppelin source code meant that other cybercriminals could potentially use it to create new variants of the ransomware. The prospect of Zeppelin's legacy living on through new and potentially more dangerous iterations loomed large.
The sun peeped through the blinds of Amir Golstan's corner office, casting a warm glow on his face as he leaned back in his leather chair. He surveyed the bustling workspace beyond the glass walls, watching his employees type furiously at their desks. The hum of conversation and the clacking of keyboards filled the air, a symphony of productivity that was music to Amir's ears. Amir had built Mikfo from the ground up, starting with a single server in his garage and expanding to a thriving internet services company with clients across the globe. He took pride in his ability to anticipate the needs of his customers and stay ahead of the curve in an industry that moved at breakneck speed. As he sipped his morning coffee, Amir reviewed the latest metrics on his computer screen. Mikfo's revenue had grown steadily over the past few years, thanks in no small part to Amir's relentless drive and strategic vision. He had a knack for spotting opportunities and seizing them before his competitors even knew they existed. He knew that complacency was the enemy of success in the tech world, but Amir was never one to rest on his plans. He was always looking for ways to expand Mikfo's reach and solidify its position as a leader in the industry. He glanced at his calendar, noting the meetings and conference calls scheduled for the day ahead. It would be another busy day, but Amir thrived on the challenge. He lived for the thrill of the deal, the satisfaction of watching his company grow and evolve. As he set his coffee mug down and straightened his tie, Amir couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement for what the future held. Mikfo was his passion, his life's work, and he was determined to take it to even greater heights. The first sign of trouble came in the form of an email from Spamhaus, an anti-spam organization that many internet service providers relied on to filter out unwanted junk mail. The message was brief but alarming. McFo's IP address ranges had been flagged for spam activity, and Spamhaus had started blocking them. Amir felt a knot form in his stomach as he read the email. He knew that if Spamhaus continued to block McFo's IP addresses, it could be devastating for his business. Many of his clients relied on email marketing to reach their customers, and if their messages weren't getting through, they would quickly take their business elsewhere. He immediately called an emergency meeting with his top executives to discuss the situation. As they gathered around the conference table, Amir could see the concern etched on their faces. They all knew what was at stake. "We need to find a solution, and fast," Amir said, his voice tight with tension. "If we don't get this resolved, we could lose a significant portion of our client base." The room was silent for a moment as everyone contemplated the gravity of the situation. Then, one of Amir's most trusted advisors spoke up. "What if we pivot our business model? Instead of focusing on email hosting, we could start reselling IP addresses to VPN providers," he suggested. "There's a growing demand for privacy and security online, and VPNs are becoming increasingly popular." United Ramal. Amir leaned back in his chair, considering the idea. It was a risky move, but it could be the lifeline McFo needed to stay afloat. He knew that obtaining large blocks of IP addresses from ARIN, the organization responsible for allocating them in North America, could be a challenge. But if they could find a way to secure the addresses they needed, it could open up a whole new revenue stream for the company. "Let's explore this further," Amir said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I want a full report on the feasibility of this plan by the end of the week. We need to move quickly if we're going to make this work." As the meeting adjourned, Amir felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He knew that pivoting to a new business model would be a massive undertaking, but he was determined to do whatever it took to keep McFo thriving. Little did he know, the path he was about to embark on would lead him down a dangerous road, one that would test his moral compass and ultimately lead to his downfall. Amir spent the next few weeks exploring every legitimate avenue he could think of to obtain the IP addresses McFo needed to pivot to the VPN market. He reached out to his contacts at ARIN, hoping to expedite the allocation process, but was met with a wall of bureaucracy and red tape. "I'm sorry, Mr. Golistan," the ARIN representative said over the phone, her voice tinged with a hint of annoyance. "But we have strict policies in place for allocating IP addresses. We can't just hand them out to anyone who asks." Amir gritted his teeth in frustration. He knew that ARIN's policies were in place for a reason, but he couldn't help but feel like they were standing in the way of his company's survival. He pored over the application forms and requirements, trying to find a loophole or workaround that would allow him to get the addresses he needed. But everywhere he turned, he was met with roadblocks and dead ends. As the days turned into weeks, Amir's frustration grew. He knew that time was running out, and that if he didn't find a solution soon, McFo would be in serious trouble. He began to feel like he was banging his head against a wall, trying to navigate the complex web of regulations and procedures that governed the allocation of IP addresses. He spent long hours in his office, poring over documents and making phone calls, but nothing seemed to be working. Amir's employees could sense his growing desperation, and the mood in the office became tense and uncertain. They all knew what was at stake, but no one seemed to have any answers. As Amir sat in his office one evening, staring blankly at his computer screen, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was failing his company and his team. He had always prided himself on his ability to find creative solutions to problems, but this time he was coming up empty. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, trying to clear his mind and think of a way forward. But the more he thought about it, the more hopeless the situation seemed. He knew that he needed to find a way to get those IP addresses, but he was starting to wonder if it was even possible. Little did Amir know, a chance encounter with a shadowy figure would soon present him with a tempting offer, one that would test his moral compass and set him on a path towards his ultimate downfall. In 2014, Amir Golestan made a fateful decision that would forever change the course of his life and the future of Micfo. Desperate to secure the IP addresses needed to pivot his company to the lucrative VPN market, Golestan crossed a dangerous threshold and embarked on a fraudulent scheme that would ultimately lead to his downfall. Starting in 2014, Golestan and Micfo used 11 shelf companies with fake websites and false officers to fraudulently obtain IP4 address allocations from ARIN. These shell companies, which existed only on paper and had no real business operations, were created for the sole purpose of deceiving ARIN and obtaining valuable IP addresses under false pretenses. Golestan carefully crafted each company's online presence, creating professional-looking websites and fabricating information about their supposed officers and business activities. He submitted applications to ARIN under these false identities, claiming that each company needed IP addresses for legitimate business purposes. As he hit the submit button on the first application, Golestan felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He knew that what he was doing was wrong, but the allure of the potential profits and the desperate need to save his company drove him forward. When the first batch of IP addresses was successfully allocated to one of his shelf companies, Golestan felt a rush of adrenaline. He had done it. He had found a way to obtain the resources Micfo needed to survive and thrive in the cutthroat world of internet services. But even as he celebrated this initial victory, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a warning. He had crossed a line, and there would be no going back. From this moment forward, he was a criminal, a fraudster, and the consequences of his actions would forever haunt him. Little did Golestan know that his decision to cross this threshold would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to his arrest, conviction, and imprisonment. For now, though, he pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand, obtaining as many IP addresses as possible and using them to build Micfo into a powerhouse in the VPN market. Over the next few years, Amir Golestan and Micfo expanded their fraudulent scheme, using the network of shell companies to obtain more and more IP addresses from ARIN. As the operation grew, Golestan found himself navigating a complex web of challenges, opportunities, and threats. One of the biggest tests Golestan faced was maintaining the illusion of legitimacy for his shelf companies. He had to ensure that each company's website and paperwork could withstand scrutiny if ARIN or anyone else started asking questions. This required constant vigilance and attention to detail, as even the smallest slip-up could expose the entire scheme. To help manage the growing operation, Golestan enlisted the aid of a few trusted allies. These individuals, whose identities remain unknown, assisted in creating and maintaining the shell companies, as well as facilitating the sale of the fraudulently obtained IP addresses. With their help, Golestan was able to expand his reach and tap into new markets, generating millions of dollars in illicit profits. However, as Micfo's success grew, so did the attention it attracted from potential enemies. ARIN, the organization responsible for allocating IP addresses in North America, began to take notice of the unusually large number of allocations being made to seemingly unrelated companies. They started asking questions and digging deeper into Micfo's operations, slowly uncovering the truth behind Golestan's scheme. At the same time, law enforcement agencies were also starting to take an interest in Micfo's activities. As the scope and scale of the fraud became clear, investigators began building a case against Golestan and his CO conspirators, gathering evidence and preparing to bring them to justice. Golestan knew that he was walking a dangerous tightrope, with the threat of exposure and arrest constantly looming over him. But the lure of the money and the thrill of the game kept him going, pushing him to take ever greater risks in pursuit of his goals. Little did he know that his enemies were closing in, and that his days of operating in the shadows were numbered. The net was tightening around him, and it was only a matter of time before his fraudulent empire came crashing down around him. As Amir Golistan's fraudulent scheme reached its zenith in 2017 and 2018, he found himself on the precipice of his greatest triumphs and his most devastating failures. The lure of easy money and the thrill of the con had driven him to take ever greater risks, and now he was poised to reap the rewards of his illicit enterprise. According to the criminal indictment, Golistan's activities during this period were brazen and ambitious. Using a third-party broker, he sold 65,536 IP4 addresses for $13 each, netting a total of $851,896. Emboldened by this success, he organized a second transaction for another 65,536 IP addresses, raking in approximately $1 million more. But Golistan's greed knew no bound. Even as he was counting his ill-gotten gains, he was already plotting his next move. He had a contract in place to sell a staggering 327,680 IP addresses at $19 apiece. It seemed that nothing could stop him, and that he was destined to become one of the most successful cybercriminals in history. However, even as Golistan was riding high on his own hubris, the walls were starting to close in around him. ARIN, the organization he had been defrauding for years, was beginning to catch on to his scheme. They had discovered the network of phony front companies and were threatening to revoke the 735,000 IP addresses that MikeFo had fraudulently obtained. Desperate to keep his empire from crumbling, Golistan made a bold and reckless move. In December 2018, he sued ARIN, seeking a temporary restraining order to prevent them from taking back the stolen IP addresses. It was a last-ditch effort to buy himself some time, but Golistan had underestimated his opponent. ARIN fought back hard, demanding that MikeFo provide more information about its operations and customers. Golistan, knowing that any scrutiny would expose his fraudulent scheme, refused to comply. In the end, the court sided with ARIN, denying MikeFo's request for an injunction. It was a crushing blow to Golistan, who had believed himself invincible. He had flown too close to the sun, and now he was about to get burned. As Golistan surveyed the wreckage of his once mighty empire, he knew that he was in trouble. ARIN was closing in on him, and it was only a matter of time before they exposed the full extent of his crimes. He had no choice but to prepare for the battle of his life, knowing that everything he had built was on the line. Little did Golistan know that this was only the beginning of his troubles, and that the worst was yet to come. The forces of justice were gathering, and they would not rest until he was held accountable for his actions. Amir Golistan's world came crashing down around him in December 2018, when the court denied MikeFo's request for a temporary restraining order against ARIN. The organization had discovered the network of phony front companies and was threatening to revoke the 735,000 IP addresses that MikeFo had fraudulently obtained. Golistan had hoped that the lawsuit would buy him some time, but now he was out of options. ARIN demanded that MikeFo provide more information about its operations and customers, but Golistan knew that doing so would expose his entire scheme. The walls were closing in. He had always known that his actions were illegal, but somehow he had convinced himself that he would never get caught. Now he was facing the very real possibility of losing everything he had built. In May 2019, Golistan's worst fears were realized when ARIN won a favorable arbitration ruling against MikeFo. The panel ordered MikeFo to pay $350,000 for ARIN's legal fees and to return any of the fraudulently obtained IP addresses that the company hadn't already sold. The U.S. Attorney in South Carolina had been following ARIN's civil case closely, and they had decided to file criminal wire fraud charges against Golistan. It was a devastating blow, but Golstan's troubles were just beginning. The indictment alleged that Golistan had orchestrated the entire scheme, using a network of shell companies and fake identities to fraudulently obtain IP addresses from ARIN. The prosecutors had built a strong case, and they were confident that they could prove Golistan's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Golistan was stunned by the criminal charges. He had always known that what he was doing was wrong, but he had never truly believed that he would face any real consequences for his actions. Now he was looking at the very real possibility of spending years in federal prison. As the reality of his situation sank in, Golistan felt a sense of despair wash over him. He had worked so hard to build Mikfo into a successful company, and now it was all crumbling before his eyes. He knew that he had no one to blame but himself, but that didn't make the pain any easier to bear. Golistan's ordeal was far from over, but he knew that he had to face the consequences of his actions. He had gambled everything on his fraudulent scheme, and now it was time to pay the price. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but Golistan had no choice but to keep moving forward, one step at a time. In the aftermath of ARIN's arbitration victory and the criminal charges filed against him, Amir Golstan found himself in a precarious position. The fraudulent profits he had amassed through his illegal IP address scheme were now at risk, and he faced the very real possibility of losing everything he had worked so hard to build. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Golstan initially vowed to fight the criminal charges. He had come too far and risked too much to simply give up now. The millions of dollars in illicit profits he had earned were a testament to his cunning and ambition, and he was determined to hold on to them at all costs. In Golstan's mind, these profits were his reward for the risks he had taken and the challenges he had overcome. He had built Mikfo from the ground up, navigating the cutthroat world of internet services and carving out a niche for himself through sheer grit and determination. The money he had earned through his fraudulent scheme was proof of his success, and he was not about to let it slip through his fingers without a fight. As he prepared to mount his defense, Golistan couldn't help but reflect on the path that had led him to this moment. He had always known that his actions were illegal, but the allure of easy money and the thrill of the game had proven too strong to resist. Now, as he faced the consequences of his choices, he found himself questioning whether it had all been worth it. But even as doubt crept in, Golistan clung to the belief that he could still come out on top. He had faced challenges before, and had always found a way to overcome them. He would fight the charges against him with everything he had, and he would emerge victorious, his reward intact. This time would be no different. Little did Golistan know that his confidence was misplaced. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the prosecutors building the case were determined to see justice served. As he stood on the brink of his greatest battle yet, Golistan could not see the truth that was staring him in the face. His reward was nothing more than a mirage, a fleeting illusion that would soon evaporate in the harsh light of reality. As Amir Golistan's criminal trial began in November 2021, the once confident businessman found himself facing the harsh reality of his actions. The prosecution had built a formidable case against him, presenting a mountain of evidence that painted a damning picture of his fraudulent scheme. Golistan had always believed that he was too smart to get caught, that he could outsmart the system and come out on top. But as he sat in the courtroom, listening to the opening statements and the testimony of the first witnesses, he began to realize the gravity of his situation. The prosecutors methodically laid out the details of Golistan's crimes, presenting emails, financial records, and other documents that showed the extent of his deception. They called witnesses who had unwittingly helped him carry out his scheme, painting the picture of a man who had manipulated and exploited others for his own gain. He had thought that he could talk his way out of trouble, that he could convince the jury of his innocence. As the trial progressed, Golistan's confidence began to waver, but the evidence against him was overwhelming, and he could see the skepticism and disbelief in the eyes of the jurors. Faced with the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence and the loss of everything he had built, he changed his plea to guilty on all 20 counts of wire fraud. On the second day of the trial, Golistan made a stunning decision. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Golistan knew that he had no choice. The road back from this point would be long and difficult, and he would have to face the consequences of his actions head-on. On a crisp September morning in 2023, Amir Golestan stood before U.S. District Court Judge Richard Gergel, awaiting his final judgment. The once successful businessman who had built an empire on fraudulently obtained IP addresses now faced the consequences of his actions. The courtroom was silent as Judge Gergel reviewed the case, his eyes scanning the pages of the prosecution's evidence. Golistan stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the floor as he listened to the judge recount the details of his crimes. On September 13, 2023, U.S. District Court Judge Richard Gergel sentenced Amir Golistan to 5 years in federal prison for his role in fraudulently obtaining IP addresses from the American Registry for Internet Numbers ARIN. The judge also ordered Golistan to pay $76,978 in restitution to ARIN for the costs incurred during the investigation and prosecution of the case. The sentencing marked the end of a long legal battle that began when ARIN discovered Golistan's scheme and took action to revoke the fraudulently obtained IP addresses. The case attracted the attention of federal prosecutors, who filed criminal wire fraud charges against Golistan in May 2019. Golistan's sentence was meant to serve as a deterrent to others who might consider defrauding internet registries like ARIN. In a statement released after the sentencing, ARIN emphasized the importance of the judge's decision, stating that it sends an important message of deterrence to other parties contemplating fraudulent schemes to obtain or transfer internet resources. The organization also warned that those who attempt to defraud ARIN or other regional internet registries could face serious consequences, including costly and serious civil litigation, criminal charges, and, ultimately, a lengthy term of incarceration. For Golistan, the sentencing represented the final chapter in a story that had begun with his ambitious plans to grow his company, Mitefo, into a major player in the internet services industry. However, his decision to engage in fraudulent activities ultimately led to his downfall and the loss of his freedom. While the future beyond his prison term is uncertain, one thing is clear: the pursuit of success and profit should never come at the expense of ethics and the law.